The information contained in this video is intended for educational purposes. We are not responsible for any damage to your device resulting from improper disassembly or installation. Proceed at your own risk.
This is Mike from GoCellPhoneRepair.com, and today we're going to replace the screen on a Lumia 1520. We'll start by removing the two trays at the top end of the phone, SIM card and memory card. You can use a SIM card ejector to take these out. And of course, make sure that the phone is powered off. Inside this area, there's going to be a small barcode label, so I'm going to heat this up with the heat gun and go ahead and remove that. There is a torque screw underneath here that you'll have to take out. And we'll set that aside for now. And this is a T2, so one of the very rare cases where you're going to need a driver this small. And that's pretty much the only screw that holds the screen in place. From here, we're going to pry around the edges with a very thin pry tool. And what I like about these lighter gauge guitar picks is that you can actually kind of get around these corners. So we are replacing the screen. So if it gets damaged, it's not a big deal. But if you had to service your phone, you want to make sure you don't create any cracks or damage to the LCD or touchscreen. So these very lightweight, flexible pry tools tend to work out really well for this. So start at the top here and just kind of work your way around, and you will feel the clips disengage as you go around the perimeter of the phone, and the last part that's going to come out is going to be the bottom. So you pretty much pry along the top and the sides. Be very careful, of course, around the volume control keys and any other components that are on the inside. And once you get it disengaged from those areas, you can actually slide it out from the bottom end. And there are a couple more clips all the way down here at the bottom, so you really have to work your way pretty much down to just around the area where the touchscreen soft keys are. So once we slide that out, we can proceed to remove this tape that's covering some of the cables. And again, heat's going to come in very handy in this situation. That way it'll make it easier to peel this off without causing any damage. And once you get it started, again, as long as you've got it warmed up, it should peel off pretty easily. And once we get this back a little ways, it's going to expose a couple of flex cables and a retaining clip that goes over the top of them. You'll see me refer to this later on in the video because I actually put this screw in a little bit early when I was putting the phone back together. So there's a metal bracket there right here. And so we'll go ahead and take this out. There's one torque screw holding it in, and then it kind of hooks in at the bottom. So you want to take this off. You'll want to disconnect the top cable first. That is the battery cable. And then you want to be really careful when you peel this stuff off. Make sure you don't tear that other cable there. But we will need to have it out of the way so that we can remove the battery, which is probably one of the most challenging batteries you're ever going to remove from a phone. This thing, I don't know what kind of adhesive they use, but it is ridiculous. So Make sure to have your heat gun on hand and take your time. There are 4 screws down here at the bottom that we'll take out for the charging port, and they are attached to the antenna wire. So keep in mind you cannot fully remove the charging port until we disconnect these antenna wires from the channel that they're actually tucked into on the left-hand side. So take your time here. You can see this will actually expose the charging port, but again, we need to remove these little cushions from the battery, disconnect the antenna wires, and then remove them from the housing. And with this kind of stuff, I typically just pull it off and you can stick it to the battery or on your desk or wherever it's going to be handy. We want to put those little padded pieces back in when we finish. Now these antenna wires, I'd recommend you pull them out one at a time very carefully. They have little metal pieces that are built into them, and they kind of tuck into this channel and almost snap into place. So you want to be very careful when you remove these, and do take note that the black wire is actually underneath the other wire so that we put these back in the same order that they came out. And from here you can pull the whole charging port away from the phone. Now there is another panel here that you have to kind of get underneath this little tab in the center in order to disengage it. And once you do that, it'll actually just slide out to the left. And then we've got a couple of pop connectors that we can unplug. And 4 torque screws that will need to be removed. And from here we can remove the logic board, but you are going to have to be very careful here up at the top. The front-facing camera tends to stick inside of the housing. So you'll see here shortly that I'm going to take, kind of lifting it up from the bottom here, and this panel will fall out. It's kind of a little difficult to explain how that is situated in there, but you will see it when you start to take the phone apart. So here at the top, I'm actually going to go in and just kind of pry the front-facing camera away from the housing. And it almost feels as if there's some adhesive on the opposite side of the board there. But if you take your time, you should be able to remove everything from here. You also notice that my camera is missing. That's because I removed it even though I didn't need to. That can actually stay attached to the board, or you can take it off, either way. Now we've got volume cables that go along the side of the phone that are held in with adhesive. So we'll go ahead and heat this up and then very, very carefully pry it away from the frame. It's pretty sticky and you want to make sure you don't damage these. Also note that there are some little holes inside of the cable, and that will allow you to realign it with the new frame when you install it. But again, these are very delicate, especially in the areas where they're thin, so do be careful when you pry this away. You don't want to put any stress on the cable itself. And we can go ahead and set this aside for now. Up here at the top, we've got our earpiece. And I just took a thin blade here to kind of grab a hold of it. It's a little tough to pick this thing up because there's not much room around the edges, but if you're careful, you should be able to pop it out pretty easily. And then you'll notice that the new frame actually has the little earpiece mesh on the inside. Do inspect it though and make sure that anything that's on the old housing, if it's not present on the new one, you want to transfer it over. So the next thing we want to do is get this battery out, and as I mentioned earlier, this battery has a lot of adhesive. Take your time, use plenty of heat, and be very careful. I really thought I was going to poke a hole in this thing because it's just very, very difficult to get underneath it. I'm using a variety of tools here. The main thing, of course, keeping the sharp edges away from the surface of the battery. So it's okay to get underneath it with the pry tool, but make sure you're not putting leverage on it that can actually rupture the battery. If you do, you're going to have to replace it. I'm going to say I probably spent a good 10 minutes prying this thing out. Heat, pry tools, patience. That's the only way it's going to happen. So do take your time on this. Otherwise, you will be replacing your battery also. And right here, we're going to have a very good example of how effective a heat gun is. You can see as I'm heating the battery, the adhesive just starts to give way. So I'm not pushing very hard, I'm just warming it up, and it finally just kind of falls out of the phone. So again, always good to have a heat gun on hand when you're working with this, with adhesive in general. We also have the vibrator motor here that's going to come off, so I'd warm this surface up also, and then very carefully pry underneath it with the flat tool. I used a dulled razor blade. You can probably get underneath here with an iSesamo, but it's stuck pretty well, so you're going to want to be really careful that you don't damage this cable as you go under it. And we'll just go ahead and transfer that straight across right now. All right, I'll go ahead and put the battery in, and you should have plenty of adhesive left over from before. If not, you can always add some, but this stuff stays really sticky. You can see it kind of has a U formation there on the back, so when you're pulling it out, you can kind of have an idea of where the sticky part's going to be. And once we've got that installed, I'll go ahead and put the volume control cable back into position on the new frame. And I'm going to put the earpiece in. Make sure you remember to do that. And from here, again, this is kind of just a funny way that they put this thing together, but there's a retaining plate that goes over the motor, and then the logic board kind of fits in on top of it. Again, when you see the slots, you'll see how this thing is situated. But of course, when you're putting the board in, make sure you don't pinch any of your cables. You want to have those moved out of the way. And make sure the camera lines up straight, everything sits in there flush, and once it does, I went ahead and put in a few screws just to stabilize the board. This screw in particular, I probably should not have put in. You can actually put in the one just below it, because that's got to go through the retaining plate for the other flex cables. So Nothing major. If you put it in, you can always take it out later, but you just kind of want to have a screw on each side of the board so that everything stays in position, and then we can go ahead and attach our flex cables. And this one, the first time I put it on, I did not have it aligned quite right, so I actually had to completely remove the cable from the frame and put it back in. So you might even want to just plug this cable in first and then attach it to the side. Whatever works best for you, but be sure not to force it or put any stress on it. You don't want to tear the cable. That's the most important part. And of course, we want to make sure that all these cables are stuck down to the frame. You don't want anything getting snagged when you put the rear housing back on. All right, so we have our retaining clip for these cables, and this just kind of slides in. Very interesting design. I think I've only seen this on Nokia so far. And just a very unique phone. I have to say, overall, the impression I get is that it's a very durable phone, if not a little clunky. That's the best way I can describe it as far as the way the parts go together. It's just definitely a different type of design. All right, so we have our charging port. And on these antenna wires, you have to get them just right. So this may take some experimentation. Remember, we tucked the black one down inside first, and there are some little metal pieces you'll see. They kind of snap into position, and of course, we have to have enough room for the other wire to go on top of it. You may find it easier to plug these wires in at the top first and then work your way down. I had to kind of just experiment with it until I got it on correctly. So again, a little bit like HTC here as far as the antenna cables. Just there is a certain position that they go in, but it's not necessarily intuitive. So again, you might have to experiment here a little bit. The main thing being you want to make sure that they are locked down inside of that channel. There's no stress on them, and they don't get pinched when we put the rear housing back on. Right, so 4 screws at the bottom. And then we can go ahead and put this cable back into position. I would go ahead and connect the long one. We want to make the battery the last thing that we plug in, of course. And again, just kind of tricky to line this up for some reason. Do take your time. Make sure you don't force it. And you can see I had a little trouble here with the cable not going into the right spot exactly, so I had to kind of rearrange things to make it fit. And from here we can go ahead and reconnect the battery. Go ahead and put this foil tape back into position. And then, of course, before we do that completely, we have the retaining plate. And again, this is a part where I kind of overlooked the fact that we've got to have this plate in, and I had already put the screw in. So go ahead and put the plate on first, and then we can put the tape back over the top end. And from here, we will carefully put the new assembly back into the rear housing, starting with the bottom end first, and make sure that all the clips are engaged and that we do not pinch any wires or control cables in the process. Go ahead and put your Torx screw and your barcode label back into position. Put the SIM card and memory card trays back in the phone. And we are good to go. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and feel free to share it on the social media platform of your choice. For more information, visit us on the web at gocellphonerepair.com. Thanks for watching.